Led Zeppelin decided on Hypnosis to design the album cover for their next release. Up to this point, the designer duo of Storm Thorgerson and Aubrey Powell created iconic images since 1968. Their body of work up to that point captured the attention of record buyers with striking visuals and moments. Storm and Aubrey were not given access to the new recorded songs by Led Zeppelin. The only cue they got was the album's Houses of the Holy title. Hypnosis had strong and powerful visuals to the point of mythic status, yet their first meeting didn't go well. Thorgerson's album cover proposal was a picture of an electric green tennis court with a tennis racket. Jimmy Page took this the wrong way, thinking they believed their music was a racket or unpleasant noise. Storm was asked to leave the room. Page still held a grudge back in a 1983 interview, feeling insulted. Quote, "He had some balls, imagine, on a first meeting with a client." The band chose to work with Aubrey Powell, who turned to Arthur C. Clarke for inspiration. His 1953 science fiction novel, Childhood's End, culminates with a scene in which all the children of the world gather together and leave Earth. Although it was not Powell's intent, it was a great metaphor and the end of innocence for mainstream rock and roll. The organic impulse and improvised concert venues transformed themselves into stadium-sized business ventures. Aubrey warned the band that such photo shoot would be expensive, to what manager Peter Grant replied, "We don't care about the money, just do it." A third album cover idea was suggested, having the 4 Led Zeppelin symbols drawn over the Nazca lines in Peru, but it was shut down. Based on Hypnosis works at the time, Houses of the Holy seems to be a design mixture of Pink Floyd's 1968 More, Toe Fat's debut from 1970, and Renaissance 1972 Prologue album with its rocky background and perspective. The team of 3 adults and 2 children with silver and gold makeup headed out to Northern Ireland. The plan was simple. For an entire week they would drive to Giant's Causeway at 4 a.m. and take some pictures. The shoot proved to be very difficult with the winter of early November. It rained every day. They ran out of makeup and resorted to car spray paint. The 2 children were Samantha and her brother, British TV presenter Stephen Gates. Their mother supervised the proceedings in freezing temperatures and was quickly fed up with the logistics. One of the photos from the session shows two men at the shoot. The long-haired figure is not Robert Plant but model Mark Sayer. The silver man with the bald head at the back was Ian Lawton. Mark Sayer on the album shoot, quote, "A nightmare of hot coffee, brandy, mandrakes, freezing rain, turpentine tepid baths, bad food, and boredom. With miserable weather conditions, there was no California sunshine, nor Honolulu starbright. All photos were black and white. Aubrey Powell decided it was not to be a family on the cover, but children only. He had to cut each individual child out from the black and white photographs and created a montage. The process then required Scottish artist Philip Crennel hand-painting the cover with bright orange, gold and red. A special BBC show aired in 2010 featuring Stephen Gates returning to the original site and listening to Houses of the Holy for the first time, as he was afraid to experience it his whole life. Fun fact, Samantha Gates also appeared on the back cover of Led Zeppelin's Presence. Led Zeppelin's longest UK tour started on November 30th, with 110,000 tickets for 25 dates, sold in 4 hours. A back-to-the-clubs approach had audience members in close proximity to the band in a way that would be impossible past the stadium-sized tours of 1973 onwards. This was the band's last UK tour, until their 5 shows at Earl's Court in 1975 and 2 Knebworth dates in 1979. While the concert series was built around promoting Houses of the Holy, record buyers were kept waiting for the new release over delays in production. The album cover nightmare wouldn't end past the hand-painted coloring process. Initial pressings showed printing issues. The rocks looked too orange and the children were purple. Peter Grant told Hypnosis to make sure it was printed perfectly. He told Atlantic Records to pay for the designers to be in New York City to supervise the project. The Inconvenient pushed back the original release date of January to March. The rock and roll market sounds of late 1972 had the perfect setting for Led Zeppelin to present their experimental offerings next to the likes of Yes, Genesis, ELP, PFM, Focus, Santana, Aphrodite's Child, Gentle Giant, and Deep Purple's massive hard rock statement made in Japan. Rock and roll audiences embraced the supply with open minds. Led Zeppelin missed out on a big opportunity, and the audience was waiting. touring new songs from a delayed album was reminiscent of 1971. Led Zeppelin 4 was published 9 months after its recording. The House of the Holy material was 7 months old by now. Despite Robert's vocal recovery and seemingly increasing abilities to try to go back to previous levels, a sad and tragic day in Led Zeppelin's musical history took place on January 2nd, 1973 in Sheffield. Plain and simple, it's the show that killed Robert Plant's high voice. Months of damage culminated in the absolute demise at Sheffield City Hall. The story goes that Plant and Bonham were on their way to the show when their car broke down, forcing them to hitchhike through freezing temperatures. Plant caught the flu on the way to City Hall, but decided to sing anyway. His voice cracked and broke all over the place, forcing him to sing and talk his way through the songs in an injured monotone style. This performance made Plant's voice shot for the next few months, and his range was never as impressive as it used to be. He was now a different singer and would develop nodules that required surgery in late 1973. While Plant's voice managed to recover as the month progressed, some examples like the chorus section for Over the Hills and Far Away would change towards different phrasing. The band's next 2 shows on January 3rd and 4th were postponed later that month due to Plant's influenza. Judging by the band's delivery from this point on, the instrumental section was aware of Robert's demise and stepped up their performance with great confidence on stage. Bonham in particular seems to have taken this mission to heart with crazy determination. Like a blessing in disguise, Plant's vocal demise elevated his bandmates' harmony and rhythm chemistry. The singer's tragedy actually helped the instrument's dynamics improve past the 1968 to 1971 model, where as much as we know they excelled, Plant's high vocal range needed some restraint at times where he was all over the place. Ironically, had Robert not lost his famous voice, I don't believe his bandmates would have created the Grey Letter period numbers of fascinating instrumental passages. You see, Houses is the last album to consider Plant's high-pitched phrasing as a part of the composition. What happened from 1974 onwards gave us new sounds and challenged the band to find within. The way Robert handled Kashmir was incredible. Imagine if the singer from Black Dog attempted this with the baby baby yelling and screaming force. I don't think so. Because he didn't overplay this, Kashmir has aged well. The new Robert Plant was a new instrument for the band. Jimmy Page speeding up vocals on Houses of the Holy was made out of necessity and aesthetics to maintain the style and shape of their previous records. Despite the album being included on their latter day period, it doesn't belong there. What I mean is, it was written in late 71, early 72 with Robert's last months of his glorious vocals. It has the playfulness and songwriting colors of the early days. Therefore, the latter days are the first 3 albums of a different band adjusting to increasingly complicated challenges outside of the music itself. Sheffield made everyone reshape their thoughts. Plant's onstage theatrics and presence became his focus out of compensating for his lost pipes. The mystique and legend of Jimmy Page was in full force. John Paul Jones shined ever so bright, taking care of harmonic business, and John Bonham followed in true musical brotherhood. As a Zeppelin fan myself, whose starting point to live bootlegs was 1973, I was so impressed by the music that I didn't notice Plant's demise until many years later when I dared to go back to the early show bootlegs and became actually put off by his constant high-range screaming. The darker tones and restraint of new Robert Plant are welcomed. What he lost in power, he gained in wisdom and subtlety. Post-Sheffield 1973, Robert quickly learned how to use his new vocals with balance and maximum expression. Jimmy Page unleashed the ultimate stage persona, one with absolute guitar dexterity that raised the bar quite high for expectations of coming years. John Paul Jones and John Bonham grew to exponential and stronger versions of their already deadly combo. Their telepathic grooves are the standard by which rock and roll rhythm sections are measured. The Led Zeppelin 2.0 of stadium-sized venues was born.
On your top game, floor and floor tom-tom. But why not split your hands so the one's on the top drawer? No! You don't fucking listen, that's your trouble, Rob. It's embedded in here, and I can't hear it any other fucking way.
March 1st, 1973, Led Zeppelin's new record was 27 days away from taking the world by storm, or so they thought. Pink Floyd released their 8th studio album. A legendary series of shows that covered Denmark, Sweden, Germany and France. The last concert series to feature John Bonham's Green Sparkle kit. He would retire from the road after April. His 3 sets of Ludwig Green Sparkle models remain a studio tool for the physical graffiti sessions in 1974. The European tour of 1973 was a journey of greatness and craftsmanship. Peak John Bonham and peak Jimmy Page delivered the most insane performances in the band's 12-year period. Always peak John Paul Jones and Robert Plant's passionate singing against all odds made them invincible. The 7 concerts in Germany and Austria from March 14th through the 24th are a technical and artistic milestone that the band was never able to replicate, nor flow in this state of improvisation, sudden tempo changes, and avant-garde spirit. The tour would be perfect had they included no quarter in the set. Every song was played like they were conquering new audiences who had never heard them before. Dazed and Confused was the standout track from Euro Tour 73, like a musical kitchen of sinister motifs, free jazz, ancient riddles, and progressive rock madness. The question remains what exactly went through their minds to play this magnum opus historical documents. Whether it was the Pink Floyd effect, a battle of personal demons in a competitive market, or just building momentum for their massively delayed studio album. Led Zeppelin was ready to come back to the States, and they would make sure the press knew about it.
That was an old song called Dazed and Confused. And now we'd like to...
While the album sold very well, it sat next to the historical and cultural impact of Dark Side of the Moon, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, plus Band on the Run. In the prog rock helms, Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells, Genesis' Selling England by the Pound, and ELP's Brain Salad Surgery share the kingdom. In retrospect, Houses of the Holy suffers the 1973 shadow effect, like other band releases that seem to be lost within their own discographies. We can think of the Rolling Stones' Goathead Soup, Jethro Tull's A Passion Play, Deep Purple's Who Do We Think We Are, Yes' Tales from Topographic Oceans, and The Who's Quadrophenia remain great albums without the momentum of their predecessors nor follow-ups. The band's final dates for the tour were played in France. A special meeting was set up with an advertising agency executive and public relations consultant, Danny Goldberg.
Maybe 3 months later, but I've had these 3 months of being in kind of the boot camp of the Salters and Roskin approach to publicity. He said, do we want this band Led Zeppelin? Mm-hmm. So I said, yeah, they're one of the biggest bands. He says, well, you better come with me to the meeting because I don't understand anything about that music. So we flew to Paris. The previous album that they had made at the time I met them, their most recent album, was Led Zeppelin 4.
Wow, so they were
which
huge.
had Stairway to Heaven on it.
Yeah.
So they were at their apex. Well, what happened with Zeppelin is that the rock press was made up of people of a certain age, mostly mid-20s. I was, like I said, people 5 years older than me were sort of the taste makers, the Rolling Stone in particular writers. And they all loved, the Cream and the blues and the earlier, the Stones. Zeppelin comes along, number one, as sort of being looked at as derivative, believe it or not, of Cream. They got bad press. And so Jimmy Page, who was the first among equals in Zeppelin, and Peter Grant, their manager, decided, fuck the press. We just won't fucking talk to them. So for several years, they hardly ever did any interviews, would be rude to the press, wouldn't give them backstage passes, were tough about giving anybody photo passes. They were like the rebels. Then a few years passed, they've become commercially, literally the biggest rock band in the world. Their concert attendance and their record sales are now bigger than the Stones. And Robert Plant told me, because later on after I was writing, I said, why did you decide? He says, I was tired of my parents not knowing I was successful. And then he says, and then I saw the Stones on the cover of Newsweek, and that was just so ridiculous. I knew we were, so for whatever it was, I don't know if it was just Robert, but the band decides, let's get a publicist. And lucky for me, they reach out to a company that had hired me as the rock guy. We go to the meeting. So I'm on the plane with Lee, and he says, well, tell me about the Zeppelin. Tell me about the Zeppelin. I said, well, look. So we go to Paris and stayed at the Georges V Hotel, because that's where Zeppelin was staying. So we get to the meeting with Peter. So we get there, and we're supposed to meet first with their manager, Peter Grant. Peter Grant, who knew a lot of British gangsters, and people were scared of him, intimidating dude. And we go in and meet with him, and Lee says, tell Peter about what you said. Tell Peter about, you said the Barbarians thing. I said, oh, well, I talked to some of my writer friends, and, they came up with, they're worried like that the band is like Barbarians. And Peter gave me this big grin. He had these capped teeth, these shiny white teeth, big grin, and he says, yeah, but, and I can't do a Cockney accent. Right. He says, yeah, but we're just mild Barbarians. The next day I met with the band, and then we were the publicists, and then they start the tour. Houses of the Holy was the album. Comes out. Rolling Stone gives it another terrible review. Led Zeppelin, limp blimp. The only thing I could think of is an angle, because Lee Salters told me this word, angle. You need an angle. If you're going to go to the press, you have to give them an angle. The only angle I could think of wasn't that I could never convince the critics that they were good, but I could convince the editors that they were big.
Hands down, my favorite Led Zeppelin tour. Like many hardcore fans, I was obsessed with these concerts and its iconic moments, managing to have it all on CDR copies years ago that I would play over and over. Because they perfected the setlist dynamics for the last 3 tours, the 9th visit to America had to be special. With so much practice beforehand, they were able to reach insane levels of interplay between the instruments and a stage presence that could win any crowd, anywhere. Tour preparations for Led Zeppelin's 9th visit to the States were ambitious and made significant changes to the many aspects of the show. Bill Zikos is considered the father of the acrylic drum kits. He built the original kit in 1959 and received a US patent in 1970. The Ludwig Vistelite was introduced back in 1973. The drums were available in clear, blue, green, red, amber, and yellow. John Bonham chose the amber set, which seemed to fit Houses of the Holy's color style. He played this kit on stage until May 1975. The Vistelite was used as a live instrument exclusively. It wasn't featured on any of the Zeppelin studio albums. Because of its construction and materials, these drums needed to be played harder than traditional sets to project resonance in a rock and roll environment. With John Bonham's musical evolution of the past 2 years, he would further perfect his economy of movement technique, as well as augment the overall power of his drumming. Led Zeppelin's solid partnership with Showco gave them access to the latest audio equipment in the business. Showco added a new feature to the service catalog with captivating lighting and effects, such as dry ice, lasers, hanging mirror balls, pyrotechnics, a gong on fire, and the famous backdrop mirror that provided depth to the iconic visuals, costumes, bandmate logos, and more. Theatrics played a major role in what felt like a comeback. While they never left, this was the starting point for Led Zeppelin's larger-than-life status. The show stopped being the organic product of chance and moved towards an industry of epic proportions. Their imagery would inspire the inevitable future generation of copycats via hair metal and others. As much as surviving Zeppelin bandmates criticized image rock in the 80s, they created a monster and powerful template that the business followed like a sacred manual for maximum profit. Led Zeppelin wanted to take their live shows as far as they could go. For the first time in years of manic touring schedules, a plan was made. Management stopped acting on impulse and developed a strategy. With Robert's vocals on borrowed time and 3 instrumentalists getting better every night, the explosiveness of Zeppelin needed to evolve into controlled demolition. Playing the biggest venues with state-of-the-art gear and the right public relations machine behind was the pending step since 1971. The band of Stairway to Heaven couldn't spare to be overshadowed by the Stones or any other band, no more. If concert venues were the Houses of the Holy, the right mix of brute force and astute brains would take them to the promised land of absolute stardom. Emerson, Lake and Palmer may have been criticized as pretentious or pompous, but they wasted no time in growing in parallel to their sonic ambition. 1973 set the stage for Led Zeppelin to become definite entertainers and performers.
Georgia, the whole day through. Just that old sweet song keeps Georgia on my mind. Ooh, I feel Georgia, Georgia, a song of you comes as sweet and clear as moonlight through the pine. Are there all? Ah, wait a minute, hold it. The nightclub is now closed down and we can get on with the concert.
Sky was no longer the limit. The band had hired a small private Falcon jet for the first part of the tour. The aircraft was light and susceptible to air turbulence. Led Zeppelin's United States tour began on May 4th, 1973 at the Fulton County Stadium in Atlanta. The opening intro for Rock and Roll set the machine in motion for a set list that would remain the same throughout their two-leg 34 concert run. Led Zeppelin used Miami Beach as headquarters for their first 3 shows, with Mayor Chuck Hall offering the keys to the city. The selection of songs had a great pacing, with a cult status following Today. Every track is perfectly placed for an appropriate balance of light and shade. Led Zeppelin played 3 hard rock openers to then release the tension of Over Hills and Far Away. Misty Mountain Hub speeds up the velocity for a dramatic cut into Since I've Been Loving You. What follows is another 3-part run with the best from Houses of the Holy. No Quarter, The Song Remains the Same, and The Rain Song. A highlight and showcase of the new Zeppelin sounds thrill audiences across the United States. Next, the band goes into the tour de force soul kitchen of the event. Dazed and Confused is pushed to the limit every night, running the voodoo down and presenting their most evil intentions. Stairway to Heaven follows, with very passionate renditions overall. Moby Dick is John Bonham's personal highlight, with these 1973 versions a legendary take on his famous drum solo. Last section of the show runs with Heartbreaker, plus a somewhat new arrangement of Whole Lotta Love, with a small blues medley, but a massive space funk section in between. The encore position was usually reserved for a 5th song from Houses of the Holy, In the Ways of the Ocean, with John Bonham's famous opening. Communication Breakdown and Thank You were played as closers as well. Dancing Days was the encore for 1 show on July 13th at Cobo Hall, Detroit. It would not return on stage until 2 dates in 1977. Press releases kept the hype going, with news stating how the band sold out venues in record time through the accounts of promoting company Concerts West. One flight back after their June 2nd show in San Francisco gave them bad turbulence. Peter Grant took matters into his own hands and hired the Starship, a former United Airlines Boeing 720B passenger jet. The exterior was resprayed with the band's name down the side of the fuselage. Led Zeppelin's second leg of 16 shows was a serious preparation for a grand finale in New York City. Like a small business going into an initial public offering, they now belong to the expectations of media, fans, and wealth. Aware of the tour's historical significance, a quick plan was devised, with Peter Grant contacting director Joe Massad on July 14th to make arrangements to capture the band's shows at Madison Square Garden. Everybody got ready for the most important 3 nights of the tour. Although some concerts prior to these dates were musically better overall, it was a wise decision to record them and have it in the archives for a potential release. The song remained the same from Friday, July 27th to Sunday, July 29th. A fraction of the total tour money of $1.4 million was counted at 1 a.m. on Sunday, July 29th. By 7:30 p.m. it was gone from the safe deposit box. It was a preview of things to come and the Swan Song years. So going over the deluxe edition book, I saw this photo captioned July 24th at Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. At first I was like, this is a great shot, but then I wondered, it doesn't make sense. Here's why. We have a video of Jimmy climbing up the stairs to the plane wearing the Moon and Stars outfit, which we know he wore for the Madison Square Garden dates exclusively. One photograph taken at Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh shows Plant and Page wearing the same clothing from their famous photo shoot at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey before they catch the plane in Pittsburgh. Jimmy wore white pants and a black jacket at Three Rivers Stadium on July 24th. So when was the actual photograph taken? My theory is that the band played their show in Pittsburgh and then used their 2 days off to relax on the West Coast before their shows in New York. Jimmy would pick up his brand new suit in LA and wear it as they took the plane to Madison Square Garden on Friday, July 27th. You can see a woman looking at Jimmy as if she's surprised at the new outfit. Further evidence can be seen on an NBC 1973 program with footage of Jimmy dancing on the plane with Bonzo. He looks relaxed without the post-gig sweat and exhaustion. Also, why would he have the suit on if he changed this after 3 songs, going for his roast jacket for the remaining of the show? So I think the caption on the book should read July 27th at either the New Jersey or New York airport. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this obsessive-compulsive thing. Maybe we can solve the mystery once and for all. Houses of the Holy was re-released several times, including the 2014 Deluxe Edition, featuring a companion disc with alternate versions of several tracks, except Jamaica for some reason. I guess they really hate the song, right? No outtakes, no rough mixes, nothing. Houses is famous and infamous for being a bright-sounding record. You would think they would fix or boost the low-end frequency on the album, but no. This means it's actually brighter than before. Not much you can do unless you mix the whole thing from scratch, and well, we know that's not going to happen. The companion disc and book really saved the release from a missed opportunity. Highlights from the bonus material include an instrumental take of The Song Remains the Same, with extra bits of lead guitar that Jimmy would leave out of the final mix. It's a fascinating listen to envision his original intention of the overture being an introduction for the Rain song. We also got an instrumental mix for Over the Hills and Far Away. This is enjoyable and can have you singing your own version of the track over this. Dancing Days was a surprise, and it has a better EQ and sound than the original release. It's really a shame Jimmy didn't use this version instead. Jones and Bonham sound great on this track. No Quarter is the best bonus track to appreciate the sonic landscape and textures of this Jumble Jones masterpiece. The Rain song, the grunge, and the ocean offer a different perspective that does require a close and careful listen to appreciate the details. Looking at the 2014 version's cover art, I noticed something quite strange. The original album cover was slightly changed as the designing team did some edits on one of the children. Both hair and torso look different. It seems they went for a higher quality image, but I believe they overdid it here. The image looks weird. It's as if they pasted a new figure and altered some of the background to go with it. Ironically, the bonus album cover seems to be a negative version of the original artwork without the edit. Make up your mind, people. Color-wise, the 2014 cover looks better in the orange department. The negative blue bonus album cover was great too, and probably my favorite of all the deluxe edition sets. Worst bonus album cover? I would say my second favorite, of course, Into the Outdoor.
The Los Angeles Times reported today that a federal grand jury in California will soon investigate the multi-million-dollar record business. The story was promptly denied by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Los Angeles, but many people in the business have been called before a federal grand jury in Newark, New Jersey. They were asked about drug dealing, payola, mob connections, and high living at company expense. Here's a report from Betty Rollin on rich rock stars and the industry that shares their wealth.
The occupants of these limousines don't rule countries, don't make oil deals, they don't even make million-dollar movies, but they live as if they did all of those things. In their 20s, they are rich, powerful, temperamental, and pampered. They are the Led Zeppelin, a rock group on tour. No one has profited more from the rock phenomenon than the $2 billion a year recording industry.
Good evening. The Middle East war produced developments all over the world today. The oil-producing countries of the Arab world decided to use their oil as a political weapon. They will reduce oil production by 5% a month until the Israelis withdraw from occupied territories. If the Arab countries keep that pledge, it would reduce their production by almost 50% in 1 year.
The 1970s saw a transformation of the rite of passage of rock and roll, from concert goers to fans, later disciples going mad. Led Zeppelin's fifth album is the celebration of the rock star as a mythological character of infinite tales of wisdom and bringer of impulse. 8 songs in perfect running order, evoking the clash of the adolescent and young adult in the hallways of free will, surrounded by consequence. This 40-minute record is a private tour for listeners into a big party and the moments in between. This is the life of a musician on the road, achieving their goals and finally giving themselves permission to exhale success. We are a society of rituals on a never-ending quest for meaning and hope. Everybody has their own home away from home. Shapes and colors may vary, but the song remains the same. We dance, we sing, we feel. Life has a momentary sense of purpose within the houses of the holy. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for the next Led Zeppelin destination. Bye-bye.
Thank you. John Paul Jones played the orchestra. That wasn't Woody Herman, folks. It was John Paul Jones.